After 3 decades behind the scenes, Sir Philip Rutman made an extraordinary entrance into the political spotlight this morning, at the same time as announcing his exit from the civil service.
I have this morning resigned as Permanent Secretary of the Home Office. I take this decision with great regret after a career of 33 years. I am making this statement now because I will be issuing a claim against the Home Office for constructive dismissal. In the last 10 days, I have been the target of a vicious and orchestrated briefing campaign.
That statement comes off the back of newspaper reports accusing his boss, the Home Secretary Priti Patel, of bullying her staff and that she was not trusted by the security services. Sir Philip said a campaign had blamed him for the leaks and that Ms Patel, whose department he was now suing, had her hand in doing so.
The Home Secretary categorically denied any involvement in this campaign to the Cabinet Office. I regret I do not believe her. She has not made the efforts I would expect to dissociate herself from the comments.
With allegations against the Home Secretary emerging, the Prime Minister said earlier this week that he had full confidence in Ms Patel, while other supporters said that while she was a demanding boss, she was never a bully. Yet Sir Philip said he had to publicly address the Home Secretary's behaviour, despite, he claims, being offered a financial settlement by the Cabinet Office.
I have received allegations that her conduct has included shouting and swearing, belittling people, making unreasonable and repeated demands, behaviour that created fear and needed some bravery to call out.
The Senior Public Servants Union, the FDA, called on the Prime Minister to stop the kind of behaviour that forced Sir Philip's resignation, something echoed today by the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee.
The work of the Home Office is far too important to operate with a dysfunctional and distracted way of operating and with a poisoned relationship between ministers and civil servants, because this is not being sorted out. They need to act.
Sir Philip is not without his own criticisms. His tenure at the Home Office saw the Windrush scandal that led to the resignation of the then Home Secretary, Amber Rudd. And in July last year, he had to answer accusations that his department was more prone to leaks than others.
You undertook to launch an inquiry into leaks from your department, which seemed to be happening quite a lot. How's that gone?
I don't know. I don't recall exactly which leak that exchange referred
Well, it could
to.
be one of many, that's the problem.
There have been a number of leaks. We do regularly undertake leak inquiries.
Responding to today's news, the Cabinet Secretary thanked Sir Philip for his long and dedicated career, announced a temporary replacement, and said the Home Office's vital work to keep our citizens safe and our country secure continues uninterrupted. Yet for a government seeking to navigate the recent floods and the coronavirus outbreak, today's very public resignation and attack will cast an unwelcome shadow.
Well, Paul McNamara is here in the studio with me now. Paul, how big a deal is this?
Well, look, we got almost bored of saying this last year, but let's crack out again for 2020. This is not normal. Great big political resignations from MPs or ministers don't happen all that often, but from the civil service, from the people who are meant to operate behind the scenes. But I don't recall anything like this. I mean, it's not uncommon for senior civil servants and their ministers to fall out, but it's handled quietly behind closed doors. They're shuffled off, they find them a new job, maybe even early retirement. It's not done with the threatening of a court case. And Sir Philip here isn't just take aim at Priti Patel, he takes aim at the rest of government. He spoke of a wider pattern in government, and that's a very similar message to that of Sajid Javid when he resigned just a little while ago.
Right, so some Tory MPs have said, actually, this is pretty bad form from a senior civil servant to do this. But Priti Patel also has form when it comes to resignation. She was forced to resign in a previous incarnation. How safe is she tonight?
Well, at the moment, from people we've been speaking to, it sounds like support for her is definitely holding up. Loyalists to the PM that I've been speaking to today, they've been quick to point out that Philip hasn't exactly had a great history at the Home Office, especially after the last year or so with Windrush. They've also been briefing out, look, here's a guy saying, I've never spoken to the media, and yet he's operated in a pretty media-savvy way today. A press conference right at the beginning of the weekend, we're talking about as our top story tonight. It's going to be in all the front pages of the Sunday papers tomorrow. It's going to dominate the whole weekend.
He knows what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing.
OK, on that note, perhaps, there's been some other distraction of completely, ostensibly unrelated news today. Tell us about that.
Yeah, there might be one other story that's sharing the front pages tomorrow. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has announced that he is engaged to his partner, Carrie Symonds, and also they're having a baby. Early summer, you can expect a new baby in number 10. It's going to be a busy summer for all of us.
We wish them all the best. Paul, thank you very much indeed. Well, a little earlier, I spoke to the former head of the Civil Service, Lord Kerslake, and began by asking him how well he knew Sir Philip Rutman.
I knew Sir Philip very well. In fact, I was part of his appointment, first appointment as a permanent secretary in transport, and I knew him to be a very serious, able, senior civil servant who had been in the civil service pretty much all his career and absolutely recognised his role with ministers. And indeed was valued by ministers who he worked with.
I mean, the language he used today was very stark, I have to say. And, you know, he was complaining about the campaign against him, a smear campaign, people briefing against him. Having said that, you know, when it comes to media, he's not exactly a wallflower himself, is he? He managed to get the BBC's political editor to see him this morning. The cameras were ready and waiting. He clearly wanted to make a statement. He knows how to use the media.
Well, he does, and indeed you would expect him to know how the media works in his role. But I think this is the last thing on earth he would have expected to do or wanted to do. He must have been pushed to the limit, the very limit and beyond, to have chosen not just to resign, I mean, that was a big thing, but to resign in this way, to make these accusations and to in effect say, I'll take the government to court.
But taking the government to court, does this not set a dangerous precedent for what is already a bit of a proxy war between the civil service and elected officials?
Well, I think it does set a dangerous precedent, but he clearly feels very strongly, not just about his own treatment, which I think has been, frankly, disgraceful, but also about the treatment of other civil servants. And I think it's one thing to have a difficult relationship between a permanent secretary and a minister. It's another to have a minister effectively bullying their private office, which is what this adds up to. And that's unacceptable. In fact, it's very clearly contrary to the ministerial code, which the Prime Minister put his name to.
But if a minister feels that he or she doesn't have the full backing of her or his top civil servant, are they not right to force them to resign?
No, I don't think it works that way. I mean, there has to be a relationship of trust between the minister and the permanent secretary. It's clear from Sir Philip's statement this morning that he tried to repair the damage but was rebuffed by the Home Secretary.
We know that Dominic Cummings, the Prime Minister's senior advisor, has his problems with the civil service. Are we now looking at a permanent, simmering kind of civil war between the civil service and this government?
Well, I really hope that we aren't now looking at a period of really bad relationships of that sort, because it will be bad for the civil service. They pride themselves in serving the government of the day, but it'll also be bad for the government. They've got big challenges in front of them, and they need the civil service working with them on those issues.
If the accusations against Priti Patel levelled against her by her former top civil servant are proved to be correct, should she resign?
Well, I think if we go into this industrial tribunal and they come out in a way where it's pretty hard to refute them, then it does raise questions. Obviously, it's for the Prime Minister to make that decision. We need to see more of the facts. But, as I said earlier, look at the ministerial code. The foreword written by Boris Johnson says no bullying, no harassment. It couldn't be clearer. And if there is evidence of that happening in the face of his clear direction, then that raises big questions for that particular minister.
So let's be clear here. If she is seen to have broken the Prime Minister's own code of behaviour towards civil servants, should she resign, yes or no?
I think it's a position where she must seriously consider her position, yes.
Lord Kerslake, thank you very much indeed.